Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. We are talking this time about job search and specifically the questions you need to ask yourself before you start a job search. And we know that in the new year, and particularly if you've listened to our last couple of episodes about reflecting on last year and thinking about what you want, then a job search may form part of that. For some of you, it may be that you are listening to this and you are at risk of redundancy, or you are just done with a toxic environment. It may be that you're ambitious and where you are is not going to give you those opportunities to progress. So whatever reason you are entering into your job search, there are some questions that we would recommend that you consider in order to make sure that you can focus your attention and make the most of it and hopefully land the job that you really want. Pam, this is going to be a great episode, isn't it, to help people really hone in on what they're going to do before they get started.
Yeah, I absolutely love asking people these questions because I think if you go into your job search with clarity, you're more likely to get what you want and do it with less panic and less frustration because you've got a really clear plan of what you want and what you want to achieve. So yeah, I think this is going to be a great episode for anybody who is job searching or about to start job searching.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as well, if you've been in job search mode and you're getting frustrated because it feels like nothing's landing and you're not getting the interest that you want, we know that the market has been really tough. And so I think this can also be quite good to reset and think, okay, now let's just pause, go through these questions and consider, okay, how can I go again? But also almost have that mental break and mental reset to make sure that you can step away from perhaps what has been a frustrating experience to really get clarity. So let's dive straight into it then. What's the first question that you ask clients before you start working with them on their job search?
Okay, so the first question is, what am I running from versus what am I running towards? And I think with this question, you've got to be really honest because if you're leaving your role because your boss was awful or you hate the commute or because you've been forced out because of redundancy or, there's something going on in the background, then you're running from something essentially. And you need to recognize that because what you then move towards could be affected by what you're running from. And we know with redundancy, there's confidence issues. There's so many things that are going on in the background of people's job searches. So that question, I think, is super important to, as you say, pause, line in the sand. What am I running from versus what am I running towards? And by running towards, you can think about what you actually want, not what you're doing out of desperation or because you think you need to. It's do I actually want to move towards?
I'm just reflecting as you're describing that and thinking about with a lot of my coaching work, I will talk to people about motivational triggers. And that's similar, whether it's towards things that you're motivated to move to and then away from. And when I have that conversation with people, the point that I make is if your motivation is away from, so you want away from that toxic boss or you want away from a situation that isn't great, the challenge with that is that a lot of things will seem better and anything that's a step in the right direction then feels like a win. And I think sometimes if your initial motivator is that running away from, then that question can also help you think, okay, if that's what I'm wanting to get away from, what do I want to get towards? What would the dream environment look like? Or those kinds of questions. And that can really help to filter, I think, can't it, when you're on a job search, to know more of what you do want to go towards is just so crucial.
Yeah. And I think the next questions are really going to help with that, because that is absolutely true. You do need to know what you're moving towards, and you might not always have the answers straight away. You might need to think about it. You might need to reflect on it. But as soon as you start asking yourself these questions, and what I would say is get a pen and a piece of paper, like go old school, write it down, see what comes out of your head. We spend so much time on phones and computers and all the rest of it. Like, actually write it down and see what comes out, and you can really reflect on it. And if nothing's coming, if you're not feeling it, it might mean that you just need some extra time to think about it. So thinking about the next question and what you'd like to move towards, the next question too is, what am I willing to compromise on, and what's non-negotiable? Because we know the perfect job doesn't exist. And we can all say, find your dream job and never work another day in your life. Like, we know, like, to a huge extent, that isn't really true. There's always going to be elements of our jobs that we don't like. But actually, what would your ideal role look like? What do you want it to focus on? Maybe you take a little bit less money for a proper work-life balance, or a shorter commute, or something like that. So thinking about what you're willing to compromise on and what's non-negotiable is absolutely key before you start moving through the process.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this before when we talked about negotiation and negotiating your package, that if you address this before you start, a big part of it is that you can rule things out and know that is not going to be something that I'm going to compromise on. Means that you're not putting your energy and attention into applying for things that don't meet that criteria. And like you say, the non-negotiables can be about the salary, can be about the package, can be about the number of days in the office, can be about the working hours. There's so many different aspects. But like you say, tying it in with that first question of what are you moving towards, if you know what you want and you know what of that you can compromise on and it would be okay, and what you can't, then you're really fleshing out that picture of what are the roles and opportunities that are worth my time and attention before I even start with applications. So what's the next question then?
Okay, so question 3, this is a good question as well, and this usually tests people quite a bit. So what value do I bring that I'm not currently using? And this is a good one, isn't it? Because everybody will say, I've got all of these skills, but I'm not getting the opportunity to use them. So this is your opportunity to go, what are those skills? And then ask yourself, are these skills that I want to be using? Because it's one thing to be skilled in doing something. It's another thing in actually wanting to do that on a day-to-day basis. So this is a great opportunity for you to think about the value that you bring, and this will help you move towards something that is going to light you up a little bit more as well.
Yeah, and similar to that, I often work with clients around where are your strengths? And strengths, like you say, are not just things that you can do well, but they're things that actually energize you. And sometimes you can do things really well, but they feel like a drain. They don't feel like things that you want more of. But true strengths, when you're working with your true strengths more of the time, you feel in flow, you feel more energized, you get more fulfillment and more meaning from the work that you're doing. And so I love that question and that idea of, okay, what is the value that I don't get the opportunity? Almost, what are the strengths? What are the hidden things that I don't get as much opportunity to do as I would really love to do? That's a great way to shape it. And what kind of answers do you find when you're working with clients? What are the things that come up when they start to ask themselves these questions, when you take them through this process?
So I think one of the main things that comes up time and time again with this is that people might be brilliant at building relationships, but they're stuck working alone. And they spend all of their time alone, and they might be in remote roles. They might be doing roles where they've not got a team and things like that. And also, like, for sales professionals, particularly, who are absolutely amazing at building relationships, but they're on the wrong end of the sales process. And this is your opportunity to think about what you're good at and do more of it. I think that's the key thing that comes up. And also, people never really think about the things that energize them in work, because building relationships is definitely something that energizes a lot of people, like having those conversations, bouncing off people. So I always find that links in as well, and that can really energize people. And thinking about what energizes you is a really good way to answer that question. Because if you can go into work every day and think, do you know what? I actually enjoy doing this stuff. I enjoy talking to these people. I enjoy doing these particular tasks. Then it's like, that's what you want to do more of. And that's so important.
And I'm just reflecting on conversations I've had recently where a number of times I'd have a conversation with leaders who are like, I love being creative, being innovative. I love the actual leadership aspect. I'm really passionate about leading well, but my soul is being sucked by being constantly in meetings and collecting actions that I don't get time and capacity to be able to address. And so I think, considering that, if somebody was then looking from that situation for a new role, could really shape, couldn't it, through that recruitment process of, you'd want to know what is the meeting culture in the organizations that you're applying for. You might not know that before you apply, but if that's what you have recognized, that really sucks my soul. I don't have the capacity to actually do the types of things that I am good at and love doing because I'm constantly being pulled into meetings, then that would shape some of the questions that you might ask through a process when you're applying for roles.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that. And you know that I'm all about the interview prep as well. And you're absolutely right, because it is about the job search and it is about thinking what you want. But then it is also about, how do these answers fit in with the rest of the process? Because you're absolutely right with that. In an interview, if that's important to you, if the meeting culture is important to you, then you want to ask that in the interview. You don't want to just wait till you get there on the first day to find that it's totally the opposite of what you want. So asking these questions will help you decide which direction to go in, but will also help you to determine whether you accept an offer or not, because you don't always have to accept the offer. If the conditions aren't right, you don't need to accept it. And these questions, I think, are also great for getting to the bottom of what you want throughout the entire process.
Yeah, so much value from asking yourself these questions and knowing how you want to approach. So what's the next one then?
Okay, so this is a big question. This question is, who do I need to become to land the role that I want? Now, this isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. This isn't about doing like your superhero poses in the mirror before you start searching on the job boards and everything. This is about honestly looking at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and then leaning into that role, because there's no point going for a senior leadership role and going in with no confidence and no evidence and no belief in yourself. Like, you're not going to get a job offer in them circumstances. So it's about going, right, okay, who do I need to become in terms of which areas do I need to work on? If I know I'm going into an interview on the back foot, how do I make sure that I'm going in and putting my best self forward, that I'm providing all of the evidence and the stories that they need to hear to know that I'm worth taking a chance on?
I love that question. And again, what I'm noticing from what you're sharing is a lot of this is around noticing the qualities that you need to bring to the fore. So it might be that I need to become someone who is courageous enough to advocate for my non-negotiables, for example. It might be that I need to be somebody who is a great communicator and can tell the story of the value that I'm going to bring, because the stuff that you've reflected on in those earlier questions, this is where you're really then, okay, what of that do I need to bring forward in order to land that role? And so much of achieving a job offer is about going in with that perspective of, I'm going to show up as who I really am at my best, rather than I'm approaching this with a begging bowl, hoping that at the end of it, somebody will offer me something. And I think that really, from a hiring manager perspective, when we've recruited, you can really see how that plays out, where people show up a little bit timid or a little bit hopeful that they might get the offer versus somebody that shows up with real true awareness of their strengths, their development areas, what they can bring, what they would need to learn. And that is such a different experience for the recruiter. That's a really interesting process to be a part of as a recruiter when someone's showing up in that way.
Yeah, and you definitely feel that as a recruiter, don't you? It's when you've been interviewing people and you ask them a question and they start digging a hole and making up a story. And it always happens if there's like a career gap or if they've got some kind of limitation with their experience and things like that. And it's if you can just go in and be super transparent and be confident in what you bring. It doesn't matter if you've got gaps, and equally, it doesn't matter if you've got a career gap, but if you're bringing the energy and you're saying, look, this is what I can do and this is what I can do really well, then most of the time it doesn't matter about what you can't do, because the majority of that can be trained. But what they're thinking is, wow, we love this person's energy. Like, we could really see this person in our organization helping us to make an impact. And they're the people who get the offers. And it's unfortunate sometimes because people do so much prep and they go in there and they really articulate their stories and everything, but they go in there lacking energy. And it's clear, isn't it, when someone's lacking energy? So yeah, that's definitely a really good tip. If you're bringing the energy, you're more likely to get the offer. And again, that's not going in there and trying to be energetic when you're not feeling it. That's why it's super important, isn't it, to ask yourself these questions and feel energized through the process.
Absolutely. So what else can people ask themselves then before they start their job search?
Okay, so this is the final question. There's tons of other questions, but these are just the top 6 that we've picked for this episode. But this one is quite key, actually, and probably leads on from what we're just talking about. So what is my personal situation right now, and how does that affect my search? And this is a super important one, because if you're feeling down, if you're lacking energy, that is going to show. If you're looking after elderly parents, or you're a carer, or you need flexibility of some sort, that could affect your search. That could affect where you can work, how you can work. You might need remote or hybrid. You might need a shorter commute. You might have a huge mortgage and you can't afford to take a pay cut. There's so many different things that are going to affect your personal situation and circumstances. And it's really important to write them down, because in some ways, some of those things will become your non-negotiables. And if initially you're thinking, what are they? And you can't answer that, kind of working through the rest of these questions, all of these link quite nicely in together, because if you answer one, it will trigger an answer for another one. So that's how we picked these 6, because they all kinds of lead on and link in quite nicely with each other.
And I think what's also really important when you're at this point is to recognize all of these questions are really geared towards helping you to approach a job search on the basis of quality rather than quantity, in terms of applications, in terms of how many processes you are going into. Because I think one of the things that is hardest in a job search is if you don't have some of this clarity before you start, very easy to just apply for all sorts of things, but that does come across if your CV isn't tailored, if you haven't put much time or effort into. And given the way that the market is at the moment, so many people are having that experience of being ghosted, of applying for lots of things and not hearing back. And I know your success rate is absolutely phenomenal when you work with people either on the job search accelerator or on giving them a CV revamp so that they can land those applications. And that's what this does. It gives people that clarity, doesn't it, to be able to approach job search on the basis of, let's get some good quality applications in where I'll be a standout candidate, rather than spray and pray and hope that at some point it's a numbers game and something will come up.
Yeah, definitely. That quality needs to be there, because otherwise you simply won't stand out. We've done other episodes around how to stand out and things like that. But the key thing is just making sure that you are putting your best self forward, whether that's in the CV, at the interview. And the only way that you're going to do that is to be really clear on how you want to move forward.
Absolutely. So we will put the download with the list of questions so that you can take that time and journal and reflect on them into our vault, which we will have a link for in the show notes. And if you have listened to this and felt that actually some additional support will be really beneficial for you, Pam's success rates are insane, particularly working with those mid to senior candidates. So if your job search has been frustrating and you do need to reset, then we will drop the link in there so that you can get in touch with Pam and make sure that you can get the support that you need. As ever, thank you so much for listening. And if you do know somebody that is heading into a job search, please do share this episode with them. And if there are topics you would like us to cover in future episodes, then please do just drop one of us a message. We always love to hear those, and we're in our planning stages for episodes for this coming year. So would love to know what your requests are. Have a great week, and we'll be back next time with another episode.